Yeah, I+1, does anybody remember?
That's giving them input that's at where they are and it's a little step beyond so that they can understand it but can move on. It goes together with comprehensible.
Yes, it does, right, so this, yeah, the I always, it stands for the information they have, and then it's +1, right, you're always adding a little bit more.
You know what that reminds me of? What I was thinking of was like the whole idea of when you know a student's reading that style, you kind of want to challenge them by having them read a book that's about their style to kind of push them. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, you're just right, you start with where they are, but they're always trying to push them a little bit further, right? So some folks, right, as we might talk about a little bit later, this concept is very similar. This comes from this guy Krashen, right? But this is very similar to what Vygotsky developed when he talked about the zone of proximal development. So some folks, right, as teachers, you might be familiar with that. It also means you always find out, right, it's important to know where a learner is, but you've gotta always be helping them reach that next place, right? So the zone of proximal development, right, is we know where they are. Nice! Who knew I had magic fingers like that?
It's a response to your touch.
Yeah.
Oops. Response to my touch.
Yeah. You touch it.
You know what, I often, with my phone, I'm like, recognize my touch. But that notion, right, that you have to get them to the next place. All right. Anything else? Anybody else want a question or something to share? Feel pretty good about? Any favorites?
Fossilization made me think of weight loss.
Ooh, really?
Plateau.
Why?
You can't go down any farther. You get stuck.
Only it's going the other way with this.
Fossilization and weight, yeah.
Except it doesn't turn into an ideal situation,
No.
right? The other one, they make their language develop, and we're there just stuck in the plateau.
Right, but that's
It becomes the new norm.
fossilization, right? Very important term, right? Because learners can be going along, right, and they reach a certain plateau, and if the errors are not addressed, right, then an error can fossilize. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I like learning about the BICS and Calc because I do ELL homework, and a lot of these kids will speak with me, and I think that, oh, they understand English and they're doing so well, and then when I'm helping them with social studies or science, and all of a sudden they're not there anymore, and I'm like, wait a minute, we were just having this great conversation, and now I get the difference between social and academic.
Yes, right. And again, right, that's that Cummins term. It is so key, right? The basic informational and conversational skills and the cognitive academic language proficiency. Yeah, it really is huge. And I saw that that Judy had put one of the there's a video on your blackboards. I think it's called the Iris clips or something. There's a great clip in there, and I can help people find it if they want. But and maybe you've seen it though already, right? Where there's the teacher talks to the child. Yeah. Oh, isn't that great? I mean, it's such a good example, right?
Because you're thinking for the girl, she's so bright.
Yes, and then right, what did you do to make the class? The thing. Yeah, right. So, good thing to remember. Yeah, another one that's very important, the affective filter, right? The affective filter, that's what people were talking about when you mentioned those negative experiences about language, and people mentioned emotions, right? So, I'm sorry, what was your name? Allison. Right, when Allison told us the first thing the teacher did was, how many people know this? Everybody put their hands up except Allison. Oh, great, okay, we're not, and we don't have to do anything that Allison needs, right? And Allison's like, oh, right? And then the entire time just catching up. It means, right, that her affective filter, right, her nerves, her anxiety was too high, right? And that is connected to that research, right? There's stuff going on in our brains, right? If you're too anxious, right, it actually does affect your language production. So the affective filter, we have to reduce the anxiety, right? But not too much, right? Something like kicking back, woo, this is so easy, that's not good either, right? You have to find a great balance. Okay, anything else in here? Yes?
So how does one impact the affective filter in an appropriate way?
Yeah.
Like Sharon here said she's panicked to death about taking Spanish for this course.
Yeah.
She might drive into a wall. So what happens, and what kind of interventions can be done so that she won't
Freak out.
freak out.
Valium.
On the way out. She won't freak,
I
well,
tried.
maybe there's always, other teachers can talk about this, right? Maybe there's always a little bit of anxiousness, you know? There's I don't know if anybody likes poetry here. One of my favorite poems, Theodore of Breathitt, is, there's a line from one of his poems, "The shaking keeps me steady," which means I have to be a little bit nervous or anxious, not too much, but a little bit, because then I'm going to keep pushing myself, right? So about how do teachers do that? Sometimes they create an environment that has high expectations, but they make it clear that the support is there as well. I saw some folks wearing a Patriots garb. Yeah, okay, yeah, oh my God, how about the game last week? Awesome. So one of the things last night, I was, because I'm obsessed with sports, I was watching some of the coverage last night, and you know that great play, Malcolm Butler stepped in and made that interception, right? And they asked him about it, and they said, because I've done it in practice. I did it wrong, and coaches corrected it. And he said, you better not do that in the game, right? So they had actually worked on that play, and the Patriots last night were saying that practice is so intense, they can't wait for the game, because then they're ready. And then they see, right, that practice helps them perform in a particular way. So maybe that's a little too stressful, but the players see the usefulness in it, right? So what have, how about like examples from this group? What have you done in your classroom to challenge your students to do something maybe they didn't even think they could achieve or do? So what was something you did, and then what kind of supports did you have in place so that they didn't just like shut down? Yes.
I teach 6th grade, language arts, writing specifically. I have 5 or 6 ELL students of varying capacities. But I run heavily on routine, partially for my sanity, but also just because I feel like coming into 6th grade from 5 different feeder schools, not knowing anyone sometimes, and new rotations, more teachers, more responsibilities, it's often really hard for them to transition, ELL or not. So I find that having that routine every single day, they know this comes first, and then I'll give them what they need, and that to fall back on is my support. And this year I've had students we do triple E writing. It's like a structure, basically the first time they're ever thinking about what they're saying before they write it down and having a purpose. And the students I've worked with this year have surpassed last year's tenfold. And it's been just shocking for me. And I think that I'm pushing them now to places that last year these same kind of students never made it to. And even my ELL students are writing the base paragraph, which they're like, I can't believe I wrote this in English kind of thing. So I feel like having those routines and knowing what's expected of them and feeling that security and okay, at least I know if it's this point in class we're going to be working on this and then I'll have this next. But yeah, I've seen some huge gains. So I'm pushing them still, even though it's really much more than last year and much more than maybe the expectation would have been, but it's so far so good.
Can you say what again it's called?
Triple E, the writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, triple E writing. It's the evidence, explanation, or echo, evidence, and ending.
Nice, thanks. So I think let's see. Right, if you have different kinds of support, right? Support can be kind of emotional support, right? Support can also be predictive routines, right? And sharing expectations. A great way to help your students as well with that anxiety is just as Sharon was sharing, is show your learning to the students, right? It kind of makes public that there's some risk-taking involved in learning, and sometimes if we share their feelings about that risk-taking, it inspires them. Okay. All right, so these we're going to be coming back to, but let's just kind of go on. All right, so some of these things about what's your definition of language? What does it mean to know language? What does it mean to be proficient? And there's some nice examples in there. Does anybody want to share stuff? what does it mean to be proficient in a language? What can you do?
You can function in the day-to-day world.
Something functional in the day-to-day world? What would be an example?
You can go and apply for your driver's license when you want to get it. You can read and write the tests that you need to do to get a driver's license. Those are the basic functions that you need to be able to do to be a functioning adult to be able to get to work.
Right.
So, and that can be a big issue for students.
Right.
Do that.
Right. So that's great, right, great example. Anybody else about proficiency? Yes.
I look at it as being able to have a conversation and use the language that fits the conversation that is being discussed at that time. So it's targeted. You have those capabilities to decipher if this is casual, if this is academic, or if this is specific on something else.
Oh, so you can shift, right? You can shift in terms of context and maybe what we call register. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to give you an example when you're not proficient,
Mm-hmm.
just to show. I was in France once, and in those days, it was a long time ago, you had to go through a concierge to get the phone because people didn't have phones and everything. So I got called in, and somebody called me, and I had to call and say, well, I'm sorry, I can't come to this party. And at the end of the conversation, the person said, au revoir, Betsy. And I'm not Betsy. So I thought I had this whole conversation, the person didn't even know who I was. So I remember that as being a terrible experience. Well, I'm not calling her back because through the concierge and the whole thing. So I went back and I thought, oh, long way to go.
Right. Don't we all? Right, but that's really, it's really important to think about, right, what we can do and what we can do in different contexts. So that's why with the shift to academic language, right, it's really important to have this understanding of academic proficiency. Because academic proficiency is a whole lot more complicated than social conversation, right, than playground proficiency. And one of the things that's an interesting term, is it up here, was also this notion of competence versus performance. And this is, when we talk about maybe getting A's in a particular language class, right? That maybe we did have a particular kind of linguistic competence, what we knew about the language, but when it came to ordering food in the restaurant, talking to the concierge, it wasn't there. But it can also mean, just as we keep talking about emotions, right? Have you ever been in a situation, I know this, I got this, I have it, and then in that moment, the heat of the moment, something happens, performer, basketball player, he makes free throws, she makes free throws 98% of the time, game's on the line, a second left, boom, misses it, misses the free throw, loses the game, right? Does she not have the confidence? No, she definitely has the confidence, but the performance, right? It wasn't there at that time. So one of the points they make in the book is that you need so many opportunities, you need to give students so many different opportunities to demonstrate, to build their confidence. Because if we just wait for one high-stake test for that performance, we might not really understand our students. I think that's what the application of this is for teachers. One of the things they mention in the book is what linguists argue about is they say the confidence is in your head and performance is out in social. So no one can ever really assess the confidence because and it's different from performance. So what do you think about that? Is that a useful thing to think about, or that is linguists who have too much time and get real jobs? So I want you to turn to the person next to you. What do you think